Lineage is a piece for large orchestra which I wrote in 2013. It was commissioned from the New World Symphony in Miami and San Francisco Symphony, but this is the first time that it will be heard in Canada, and it'll also be my first time working with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, which I'm very excited about. So just to give you a few ideas about what I was thinking about while writing the piece, at about that time, my grandmother had passed away, so I was thinking about doing a piece that was a bit of a tribute to her, but I was also reflecting on what it meant to be a third-generation Canadian and how we relate to our culture. There's a sense of sort of distance that I started feeling and that I was interested in. My grandmother used to always tell me lots of stories, and I loved hearing about them and hearing her repeat these stories. But in some ways, it's sort of a memory of a memory. It's a secondhand memory. It's not your own memory. And I thought this would be something interesting to explore in music. And for me, this translated into the idea of trying to create a sort of imagined folk music, not something that's very studied as in with musicology, where you try to understand a particular culture's folk music, but more as if from the perspective of a child listening to these stories and creating an invented landscape. So this was a starting point for me. I also thought a little bit about how that might reflect with music, what stays the same and what changes over time. So it was important to me to have certain landmark points where we have material that returns to develop this sense of memory and attachment to the piece, but also the piece would need to have a certain directionality and flow so we would feel it's progressing and leading us always somewhere further. One of the features in this piece, perhaps to listen for, is a microtonal chorale that I composed. And this happens at 3 points in the piece, at the very beginning, in the middle, and the very end. Microtones are intervals that are smaller than the intervals that we usually hear on a piano, so it has a bit of a folkloric quality to it. And the chorale has this very sort of lamenting, mournful quality. At the beginning, it's presented by the winds. Then in the middle, we get a sort of canon effect where it's sort of passed between different groups of instruments. And at the end, it sort of emerges after a big climax. It sort of emerges from the fog. So this is something to keep an ear open for. With my music, I often focus a lot on the orchestration, thinking about how the texture and timbre and color of the instruments can combine together to create an interesting atmosphere, and an atmosphere which evolves and shifts over the course of the piece. You'll also hear passages of ostinato, which are repeating figures that sort of create a whirring motion that propels things forward. So with these few pointers, I hope you enjoy the piece, and I am very much looking forward to working with Toronto Symphony Orchestra and hearing the festival.